Hello everyone and happy Friday. I'm Nitsuhone, and each and every Friday I bring you guys an MTG top 10 list. This week we're looking at the best X spells in Magic's history, in other words, Magic cards with X in their mana cost. This doesn't just include instants and sorceries, but also creature and artifact spells. This list was inspired by the strong showing in Standard of a recently printed X spell, and that would be Walking Ballista. This is one of the cards generating the most buzz and putting up the best finishes from Aether Revolt, and this card's success got me interested in sifting through the 259 other cards in Magic that have X in their mana cost, to find out which ones have put up been the most successful in putting up Grand Prix and Pro Tour top 8s. For this list, I arranged the cards in order, with the number one card on this list putting up the most Grand Prix and Pro Tour top 8s. Before we get started, I'll remind you of my scoring system. Cards receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s they've received, with a Pro Tour top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix top 8. The cards in this list are arranged numbers 10 through 1, with the highest score being found at number 1. Alongside each of the cards, you will also see the breakdown of these points and some other relevant information about the card, such as what formats it has seen success in. Starting with this list, I also include a format-by-format breakdown of where the points were earned, so you can get a little more detail about where cards earned all of their points. In addition to events that are called Pro Tours and Grand Prix, I also count the Worlds events that occurred before the Pro Tour started in 1996 as Pro Tour top 8s, as these were the highest level of competition at the time, and also I consider Legacy Championships and Vintage Championship events as Pro Tour top 8s, so that those formats can be properly represented in the score of the cards, as Vintage has no Grand Prix or Pro Tours, and Legacy has never had any Pro Tour opportunities. In addition to the top 10 X spells that appear in this video, I've included the score of all X spells that have managed to obtain 10 points or more, but didn't make this list in the description below. Now let's get started with number 10. At number 10, we have a relatively recent card, Secure the Waste. This card was incredibly powerful because it not only spits out a bunch of tokens, but it does it at instant speed. It made decks that played board sweepers pretty bad, too, because you could always leave mana up for Secure the Waste and quickly rebuild your board after a clunky sorcery speed removal spell. Despite how powerful the card was, it didn't do a whole lot for the first several months it was in Standard, picking up only one Premier Event top 8 in the first 6 months it was legal. However, eventually, Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, were printed, and these two combined to create a powerful green-white tokens deck in Standard, and that is primarily where Secure the Waste picked up its numbers. Unfortunately for Secure the Wastes, it only had a few months with these cards, as it rotated out with the release of Shadows over Innistrad. Since rotating out of Standard, it has managed one Grand Prix top 8 in Modern, as a singleton copy in a Bant Eldrazi deck. It seems like it might be powerful enough to see more play in non-rotating formats, but it still needs to prove itself there. At number 9, I have Green Sun's Zenith with 40 points. This card is powerful because it allows you to run a toolbox of sorts in your deck, running singleton copies of powerful and situational effects. It is also quite good in a creature-based combo deck, as it allows you to basically run additional copies of each of your combo pieces. The first decks it appeared in were green ramp decks that sought to power out Primeval Titan. This deck ran some nice singleton situational cards as a toolbox as well, like Acidic Slime. The Zenith could serve as a key to a toolbox or as a way of getting Primeval Titan into play, making it an important card in the deck. It also found its way into a few Birthing Pod decks in Standard, where it could serve as an alternate way of finding your combo pieces or toolbox creatures in addition to the pod itself. Green Sun's Zenith saw some play in Modern too, where it could provide mana acceleration with the help of Dryad Arbor, effectively allowing you to play 2 lands on turn 1, or as is always the case with Zenith, to find situational toolbox creatures. This proved to be a little bit too efficient for Modern though, and the card was banned in Modern in 2011 before it could do too much there. However, it has lived on in Legacy, where it has appeared in a variety of green decks, but it has probably found the most success in Elf decks there. At number 8, I have Fireball. It's one of Magic's oldest cards, having been printed first in Alpha. There it made up the very first 2-card instant win combo with Channel. In the early years of Magic, this was its primary role, but it also provided Red with a way to kill large creatures, which it didn't have in the absence of Fireball, so it appeared in a lot of Red decks as a removal spell, or as a way of doing the last points of damage between 1994 and 1997, including aggressive decks like Red Deck Wins and Sly. Over time, though, Fireball got to be viewed as a little bit weaker as better removal was printed, but it reemerged in 2004 in Mirrodin Block Constructed, where it was played in a mono-red control deck and lots of other decks with red in them. It was so ubiquitous in the format that 5 of the top 8 decks at the Pro Tour Kobe that year had it in their deck list. Since then, though, it hasn't seen any play anywhere, and unless there is a return to block formats and it gets reprinted, 2 things that probably won't happen, it probably won't ever be strong enough to return to its glory days. At number 7, we have Court of Calling. Court of Calling is a powerful tutor spell, and as a result, it sees play in a lot of creature-based control decks. It didn't see any play in Standard the first time it was printed in Ravnica block, and only has one Grand Prix top 8 to show for the second time it was in Standard after being reprinted in M15. However, it has seen a lot of success in non-rotating formats that have a lot more creature-based combo options as well as toolbox creatures. In Extended, it put up one incredibly dominant finish at Pro Tour Berlin in 2008, where it picked up 5 of the top 8 slots. Chord of Calling dominated the format, and most of the decks in the top 8 ran a bunch of elves, and then used the Chord to search up Predator Dragon for the win, as he devoured all of the elves and swung for lethal. After Extended disappeared and Modern was created, it continued to see play, and it continues to see play to this day. Instead of grabbing Predator Dragon for elf decks, now it usually grabs Craterhoof Behemoth. Additionally, it sees play in decks that try to win with the Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker combo, as it can be used to tutor up whatever you need to combo off. Chord will continue to see play in Modern for the foreseeable future. At number 6, we have Bonfire of the Damned. Bonfire is a crazy powerful spell, provided you can cast it for the miracle cost, and it can often represent a one-sided board sweeper that also damages your opponent. As is often the case with super powerful cards, Bonfire of the Damned dominated the block format, proving to be one of the most powerful cards in Innistrad block, putting up 3 top 8s at Pro Tour Avacyn Restored. It was no slouch in Standard either, where it found its way into a ton of different decks that just happened to be playing red, including Blue-Red Delver, Nyapod, Rakdos Aggro, Black-Red Zombies, Jund Control, and you get the picture, aggro decks, control decks, everyone wanted to run it. It is powerful enough that it has even seen play in Modern, where it has put up top 8s in Malirapod decks and Jund decks, and it even has one Grand Prix top 8 in Legacy, appearing in a Rug Delver deck back in 2013 at Grand Prix Denver. The Bonfire hasn't been burning quite as hotly lately, though, and hasn't put up a big finish since May of 2016. It is certainly powerful enough that it could find its way into Modern once again, though. At number 5, we have the card that I was the most shocked ended up on this list. It wasn't a card I even thought of as making this list, but it does, and that card is Syncopate. Certainly a serviceable counterspell, but nowhere near the most powerful card on this list. Syncopate benefits instead from the fact that it was in Standard twice and saw regular play there, first in Odyssey and a second time in Return to Ravnica. It also put up good finishes both times it was in block, putting up 1 Pro Tour top 8 at Pro Tour Osaka in 2002, and 4 Pro Tour top 8s at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze in 2013. Control decks are obviously where this thing thrived, including Psychotog decks in its first run through block, and Esper and Azorius control decks the second time. Its first run through Standard, it picked up a few Grand Prix top 8s in control decks, but it put up the bulk of its numbers its second time through Standard, where it showed up in blue-white flash decks, blue-white control decks, and Esper control decks primarily. If this gets reprinted again, it has a great chance of seeing play in Standard, but it pales in comparison to most of the counter magic available to players in non-rotating formats. At number 4, we have another artifact with 2 X's in its mana cost, like Walking Ballista, Chalice of the Void. This card is ubiquitous across several formats because it can effectively shut down certain strategies, even by just setting it to 1 charge counter. In Vintage, this is quite powerful as it shuts down the majority of spells, and it is true of Legacy as well. In Modern, it is a good card for shutting down certain decks, especially burn and aggro decks, and Infect, as the majority of their cards cost 1 or 2 mana. Despite all its power, it never saw play in the Standard format of its day, which, looking back, might be sort of surprising, as it would have been a pretty good sideboard card against Goblins and Affinity, but it was probably overlooked. People immediately saw how good it could be in Legacy, though, as it appeared there as early as 2005. It didn't make its debut in Vintage until more recently in 2011, but it is basically a staple there now. In Modern, it has had its up and downs, but was most widely used in the recent dominant Eldrazi decks that had to get banned out of Modern. It will continue to see play and build its resume thanks to non-rotating formats. At number 3, we have the only creature to make this list, and sort of Walking Ballista's big brother, Hangerback Walker. Hangerback Walker was insanely ubiquitous in Standard when he was legal there. For a time, most decks tried to cram him into their deck no matter what color or synergy he had with it. This included more artifact-centric decks like the Insol Artifact deck, but it also included Green-White Megamorph, Abzan Aggro, Green-White Tokens, Gruul Ramp, and a ton of other decks. The Walker is powerful because for a low investment you get a creature that almost always leaves something behind, who can also progressively get larger as the game goes on and make sure he leaves even more behind. The Walker has even been powerful enough to see some play in non-rotating formats, picking up a single top 8 in an Affinity deck at Grand Prix Oklahoma City in 2015 in Modern, and has even shown up in Magic's most powerful format, Vintage, where he managed to pick up 2 top 8s at the 2015 Vintage National Championship, and it continues to see play in Vintage in Eldrazi decks, Mud decks, and Stax decks, so it won't stop putting up numbers anytime soon. At number 2, we have Sphinx's Revelation. This is the card that enabled tons of control decks to exist in both block and Standard. The Revelation picked up 5 of the top 8 slots at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze in 2013, all in various control decks, either Jeskai, Azorius, or Esper. In Standard, it appeared in more or less the same decks, but also added blue-white control to the mix, and this became perhaps the best deck for the card, and certainly of all the decks it was in, this is the one that was the most dominant. At Pro Tour Gatecrash, it picked up 4 of the top 8 slots, for example. It has even seen play in Modern, picking up a Pro Tour top 8 at Pro Tour Born of the Gods and several Grand Prix top 8s, but it has stopped seeing play for a while now, ever since 2014. However, it has recently experienced a resurgence, picking up a top 8 at Grand Prix Dallas in November of 2016 in a Jeskai control deck, and has gotten close to top 8s at other Modern events as well, so the revelation isn't done just yet. And at number 1, exploding with 122 points, we have Engineered Explosives. Similar to Chalice of the Void, both are premiered in block, it was not played at all in the standard environment of its time. However, it has put up insane numbers at basically every other format. It first excelled in the extended format as a sideboard card that was effective at fighting against Affinity because you could blow up the artifact lands for a very low cost. It was also good against decks like Goblins, which ran a lot of creatures of the same mana cost that could all easily be destroyed by Engineered Explosives. It showed up in the sideboards of a wide variety of decks, including Tron and Scepter Chant. In Modern, it appears in control decks and Hate Bear sideboards regularly as it is a good way of dealing with aggro decks that run many creatures of the same low mana cost. In Legacy and Vintage, 2 formats with mana costs that are mostly very low, Engineered Explosives is an efficient way of nuking your opponent's board, and those are the 2 formats where it sees the most play. Well, that does it for this week's MTG Top 10. I will, of course, be back next week with another one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button. If you have any questions about the video, post them in the comments below. And if you want to make sure you catch future Top 10 lists from me, as well as other MTG content, don't forget to subscribe. Also, my content is sponsored in part by 5colorcombo.com, a great website for your Magic Gathering needs. You can find articles and podcasts there from a lot of different content creators, as well as a store where you can use my discount code NITSAHONE5 to get a 5% discount. Thanks for watching.